Welcome to Wired In. I'm Steven Humphrey, and I'm thrilled to be your host. On today's episode, we explore the state of innovation. We all know it's the key differentiator for electronics and high-tech companies. Now more than ever, companies need to get to market faster. How are leading companies making sure they have the edge when it comes to accelerating innovation? I recently sat down with Helen Yu, host of CXO Spice and CEO of Tygon Advisory. Helen brings over 15 years of executive leadership experience from Oracle, Adobe, and Marketo, and drove multi-billion-dollar revenue growth. She was the ideal expert to explore this topic. All right, let's dive in. Let's kick it off with a question I think every leader is facing these days. Should you be focusing on protecting what you're good at, or really more so on creating the future and making disruptive bets? What's your take?
Well, Steven, I'm glad you're asking that question because that's the tension I see in every boardroom today. My answer is that you got to do both. If you think about electronics and high tech, right, the product life cycle is in months, not in years. And I chair I'm the committee chair for culture and compensation at communications engineering company, that's CEC. Last year, we achieved 26% growth with 250% EBIT. How? We did that because we were protecting our core while also creating the future. I work with a lot of companies, they have millions of units of the parts and then also have hundreds of thousands of customer configurations. If you only protect the core, while the core may be obsolete in 18 months, that's not going to work. So that being said, you have to do really both.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And when I think about some of the most successful companies out there in the electronics and high-tech space, right, they kind of have their moat around their core business and their heels dug in around that, but they're also really pouring money into that future, the disruptive bets, the things that might not pay off for 5-10 years, right? Because if you lean too heavily on your core business, we've seen time and time again, companies, they just kind of become irrelevant if they're not really being innovative and continuing to disrupt the markets. The next question that comes to mind to me would be, how do you see leaders really today striking that balance between maintaining their strengths and then also really driving that disruptive change that's so important?
I would say treat your business as a portfolio. So I use a 70-20 and 10% framework. 70% of the time you should protect your core. That 20% focus should be on adjacent innovation. But you've got to make that transformational bets with that 10% of focus, right? So that's, you can really leverage that framework to better manage or balance the strengths while also creating a future. Steven, when I help Adobe pivot from creative leader to digital marketing leader, we did not ditch Photoshop, right? We build the new capabilities on top of foundation, the modern foundation. So in electronics and high tech, we need to build this ambidextrous leadership. What that means is that leaders are no longer managing products. They're managing data across mechanical, electrical, software, and supply chain, all on single digital thread.
That's a really great point. I love the whole concept of the ambidextrousness of organizations. So, on that topic, I would like to maybe pivot to another question, right? When you think about how organizations really can balance investing in new technologies while maintaining, their existing strengths and continuing to be disruptive.
Well, you got to be surgical and stay focused, right? And find the biggest pain point and then tackle them first. In electronics and high tech, there are 4 main problems or business challenges. Number 1 is the volatile supply chain, right? A chip or shortage hits, tariff shift overnight, or supplier missing a deadline, so you have to be prepared for that. Or, second one is the speed to market. We're talking about product life cycle could be obsolete in 12 to 18 months, right? Thirdly is your process and inefficiency, right? There are a lot of siloed systems, the company that I work with, so you have to make sure you have the visibility to the connected data. Lastly is the regulation, right? How do you make sure you understand the compliance and regulation requirements in all the different markets you're in. But on top of that is the importance of the partnership, because you can't do this alone in such a complex landscape. You have to make sure you have a partner or many partners who can really go to market with you and then really complement you and then to maximize your strengths.
Yeah, no, those are great, points, and then the kind of the pillars there that you talked about with the strategic focus and having resilience and things like that. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the partnership aspect, because you're absolutely right. We can't do all of this on our own, right? And I think about, for us, we have a partnership with NVIDIA, and NVIDIA has a lot of partnerships with people, right? And with them, we're doing some really innovative things around simulation and their Omniverse capabilities and some of their CUDA, libraries that we're now going to kind of plug into our solution. And we wouldn't be able to do that without them, right? So, and conversely, they wouldn't be able to embed some of the technology that we have without the partnership, right? So it goes both ways.
Speaking of PTC and NVIDIA partnership, I was at NVIDIA GTC conference very recently in Washington, D.C. PTC was mentioned in Jensen's keynote.
Yeah.
So I was very excited about it. I actually text Christina, just let her know that, hey, I saw PTC logo there.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting for us, and especially for myself, who coming from the semiconductor industry, I've worked with NVIDIA before, and I think a lot of the things they're doing with like the AI factory and simulation and digital twin of everything, it's incredible, and we're really excited to be working with them.
They have created the whole new industry on its own. Yeah.
Now I understand NVIDIA is also a partner of yours, right?
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I've been working with them for quite a couple years now, and I'm actually going to work with them. In the next few days, we're going to highlight their partnership with the entire ecosystem. Right? They have startup inception program, which I'm very much involved in as well, and we work with their the startups in their inception program to help them drive the growth and scale, right? And then on top of that, I'm working with their marketing team to help them build more strategic messaging and help them really align that with the business problems and market needs.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the pace of change that we're seeing in electronics and high tech, right? Even though we know a lot of these companies they're creating the future, speed really matters for them, right? The tech landscape is changing so fast every day. We think, for example, automakers, right? They spent a century kind of optimizing the internal combustion engine in automotive uses, and then all of a sudden, within 10 years, Tesla just completely flips it on its head with the new kind of model EV first design, right? Direct to consumer sales, over the air software updates. But the real disruption wasn't just putting a battery into a car, right? It was treating the car like a smartphone on wheels. And that took technology, and that took taking risk and making disruptive bets like you've talked about, right? Now every single OEM in the market is racing to catch up to them.
I was going to make a comments about, can you imagine, like very soon, we don't need to drive anymore. You're going to have robot taxi wherever you go. You can have robots in the room who become our coworker. And that will be a whole new world, but it's in sight.
It's absolutely in sight. And I think that's a great pivot maybe back to just core electronics and high tech, right? And again, for someone like Tesla, the disruption is really about chips, right? And autonomy and sensors and software, and less around the actual car itself, right? Things like you mentioned, autonomous driving to advanced infotainment and connectivity in cars. This is all really being defined now by electronics and software.
That's an inflection point. Every company becomes a technology company, regardless of the industry you're in.
Absolutely. So, I think this brings me to a really a good point I want to move to now is, what are some of the risks you would see for these companies that are maybe moving too slowly, even though they are innovating, right? They're coming out with innovative, disruptive products, but maybe because some of the other things you've mentioned around siloed systems and disconnected teams, they're still moving too slow, right? What are the risks there for companies today?
Welcome to the new era, Steven. Disrupt or disappear. And that's extremely true for electronics and high-tech industry. Think about, how fast the product cycle goes, right? Some of the companies only exist for 12 months before they disappear. And we had 9,000 or almost close to 9,000 public companies. Now we have 4,300 only. Not all of them disappeared. Many of them turned into private company,
Sure.
right? PE firm acquired, and then, but many of them really disappeared. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. When things are moving so fast, so like you said, some companies are being acquired, organizations are dynamic, they're changing quite a bit.
So, when you move too slow, it's not about, like, the risk is really you won't really exist anymore, right? Not only that, the speed to market. Think about, by the time you come up with a new product design, your competitor is already there, rolled out the new product that they can replace you, right? What happened to Coda? Think about,
Absolutely.
what happened to many other companies and brands that we used to see. Where was that company? Woolworths, right? I think that when I was little, I've seen now they don't exist anymore, right?
Right.
Walmart is still there because it continue to innovate.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's you think about things like transforming your business and going from analog to digital, or mechanical to electrical, or merging those domains, right? How do you think organizations can better prepare their teams for these shifts that are on the horizon that they're going to ultimately face?
That's my favorite question, by the way. So I would think about the 4 Cs, right? The first C is capability building. We're not talking about just the normal capability. We're talking about upscaling your employee, role-based upscaling, right? If you're a mechanical engineer, you better understand embedded system, right? If you are the supply chain, it's not just about getting digital. Supply chain needs to be really connecting all the silo systems, right? You need to be able to know what's happening with your suppliers. And then if supplier miss a deadline, you need to be able to find an alternate solution, not in days, right? In hours, right? And then the second C is about convergent, or hiring for convergent skills. You need really people who have cross-domain knowledge. For example, if you hire someone from automotive industry to come here to help you build out the innovation, if you're a chip industry, then you need someone with different domain knowledge, right, to cross-pollinate. And the third C is about kind of the connectivity of your system. Having all the siloed view of your data won't really get you anywhere. So you want to make sure you have prepare your team and have the really system agility to help you. The last C is about having the clarity of your vision and accountability, right? Make sure that you have the internal or cross-functional, or even with your partners, the shared metrics and responsibilities, and making that's how you can maximize the impact. But at the end of the day, preparing your team means to enable them to make sure that they have the visibilities to data. They have not only the data, we're talking about the cross-functional, right? This whole mechanical, electrical, software, and supply chain, all on a single digital thread. You have to make sure the team is prepared through the entire value chain.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I really love that concept of the 4 Cs. So I just want to recap them to make sure I have them. It was capability, convergence, connectedness, and clarity.
Yeah.
And as a former mechanical engineer working in the electronics and semiconductor space, I couldn't agree more. Right, I had to quickly come up to speed on embedded systems, hardware designs, basic electronics, even to moderately advanced electronics, and then the systems that made it all work together. Right, and not every company maybe fosters that type of environment, right? And so having someone like you with your perspective to really guide, I think, is great.
I think at the end of the day, people are the ones make that difference, right? That leadership with ecosystem thinking is really the key in making everything work.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, what I'm really hearing is, all the major disruptions that we're seeing in the market today, there's really a common foundation in it, and it's electronics and high tech innovation, right? We talked about, whether it's automotive, aerospace, medical technology, more and more, you're seeing electronics and high tech really become a key component there. And at the end of the day, I think hardware and software evolving together is also a huge player here, right? Because as the hardware constantly gets better and as GPUs are becoming more capable, the software also then needs to be enhanced and refactored and to be enabled to take advantage of that.
Exactly, right? NVIDIA and PTC's partnership is a testament of that.
Sure. Awesome. Well, I think we can wrap up and really just talk about some of the key takeaways, I think, from our conversation today. At the end of the day, companies, they're really prioritizing to create the future, right? Not just to protect their core strengths, right? That innovation is really essential to avoid obsolescence, right? Also building strong, agile partnerships, right? We talked a little bit about that today, and leveraging the collaborative ecosystems out there that are really critical for long-term success. I think we also touched on speed and adaptability, right? And how that sets leaders apart and how organizations must really reinvent themselves quickly to stay ahead in this really fast-changing tech landscape. And then, of course, evolving your talent pool, right? Preparing teams to shift from analog to digital or from mechanical to electrical.
From digital to convergence.
And that
right?
convergence, right? That's becoming even more important and present today. So, I think we can just recap with every revolution, right, in this space, whether it's photography, music, cloud, technology, mobility, it's really all underpinned by electronics and high tech, right?
Yeah, I see robots flowing everywhere, and we have to learn or adapt to the reality we're going to coexist with machines
Absolutely.
as co-worker.
And I think that as we see that, that's really going to reinforce the ideas of innovation and adaptability for these companies, right? And how that helps define long-term success in this really tech-driven world. Helen, thank you so much again for being here with us today on Wired In. Maybe you could tell us a little about where our audience can find more information about you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Steven. Such a pleasure chatting with you today. People can find me through CXO Spice YouTube channel, or they can find me CXO Spice newsletter, LinkedIn, or on X.
Great, thank you. Links to Helen's socials can be found in the description below. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button to stay wired in, and we'll see you next time.